leaders, welcome back to the Innovative Leader Podcast. David and I are excited to be here today after we had a week off last week. Different things happening here in Texas, and David had some family things, so we're really excited to be back with you. And today, hey, David.
No, I said, yep.
That's right. All right. So today I'm like all on task. There's so much happening. Today we're talking about the difference between a 2.0 organization and a 4.0 organization. And one facet of that really has to do with structure versus flexibility. And a word that some people use is liquid. So in our 2.0 world of leadership and business and teams, we have been in this time where structure was really our friend, and structure allowed for systems and organizations and communication and a lot of things that allowed things to be in a manner that they could move faster and faster because there was fixed and firm structure. Right. And 3.0 is kind of a time where we were learning how to have structure with flexibility. 4.0, we begin to come to this other side of the road where we're really leaning heavily more into fluid, not ambiguity, but it's more liquid. And right. Things are, I think I like to use the word squishy, but things are more squishy. They're a little more fluid. They're a little less defined. And that can be really uncomfortable for us as leaders. What does that mean? How do we lead in that? And so today we wanted to discuss the difference between that and how do you be an organization that is more liquid, both in your business, in your leadership, and with your team. So David, what are your thoughts on this? Like, first, let's kind of paint this contrast with our 2.0 organizations, which we're not saying 2.0 is bad. We're just saying it was very useful in that season. Right. And we're moving out of a season when that is not working as well. And when we try to do that, we experience pushback. People don't really appreciate it. We're fighting to maintain structure. There's all kinds of problems. So David, why is structure not working so well anymore? Is this just, a flavor of the day and people who like structure can just hold their breath and this will pass and we'll get back to structure? Or what's the deal? What's going on with structure?
Well, so when we talk about structure, one thing that I want to make sure we're talking about is kind of this hard organizational structure that where you have this you can be present in an organizational chart. You have a hard, fast leader. You have hard, fast team members. There's no adaptation in that regard. When we talk about, and we're going to talk about liquid teams, liquidity, you think of water or any liquid for that matter. It has no the shape is defined by the container it's in, and so structure is very fluid. So it's not that there isn't structure per se; it's just that structure is fluid. And so when we think about structure, the difficult part about structure is structure doesn't always allow you to adapt and change and bring in the necessary resources to accomplish the purpose or the goal or the mission of the organization or the team in general. And so that's one of the issues of a structure, is that you are so tied into a hierarchical system that there cannot be this inflow and outflow of resources to meet the demands or to meet the goals, objectives of the organization or the team for that matter. So that's the kind of the primary issue in that regard.
Okay, great. So really just kind of repeating that and boiling that down, really one of the reasons or the benefits for moving to less structure or more fluidity is so that we can adapt to change. Right. We can accommodate or allow new resources in. and we're able to adjust more quickly when things change. So it allows us this period of adjustment and adaptation.
Yeah, and the other thing is it reduces ownership, and let me explain what I mean by that. Is if you've got somebody who feels they should be in that position, in a position of leadership, and it's their baby and it's their thing, then that creates this ultimate structure, this ultimate hierarchy where they're going to fight for control of their title or their position, and it can create tension if you're more flexible and adaptive in your leadership models, more flexible and adaptive in who is on those teams. Then you reduce the I own this team and it's my team and you're going to do what I say. And that will put some people in some very discomforting situations. So, I want to also when you're part of something for a long time, you tend to get emotionally tied to it, want to take ownership of it, those kinds of things. And that structure, sometimes that person in leadership just needs to go. That either they're not an effective leader, they're past their prime. There are a lot of reasons for that. And it makes it very difficult to let that person go because they have, because of that structure and the impact that it will have all the way down the line, and especially in a real strong hierarchical situation. So anyway, so I want to throw that in as well. The beauty of fluidity is that people don't own it so much as people are part of a team. So.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's good. That's a lot of really good points. And I think it is a bit of a message to all of us as leaders regarding we are looking at this not only for our organizations to understand how to navigate and to lead organizations and teams well, but you're also looking at this for yourself.
Right.
As leaders, you can become outdated, irrelevant, and not effective. And so what you were just talking about is really important for a leader to consider. What am I owning and holding on to so hard that I'm creating a lack of flexibility? What am I being rigid about? What territory am I staking and claiming that is not allowing collaboration and
Right.
is not allowing the team to have inputs and to share their ideas? Because if I'm so heavily mandating territory and calling the shots, I am not only being ineffective as a leader myself, I am handicapping my team by not allowing their brilliance to come out. And ultimately, I'm handicapping the business because the business can't really evolve and really rise up to the level of its full potential because I'm being a lid. And so this is a really important area where we as leaders can look at our own level of control and adaptability. And if we have implemented so many structures, we're actually hijacking the ability for the organization to be flexible. We're doing ourselves and the team a disservice.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Great summary.
Great point. That's a great point. No, I think it's really important. And I think a lot of times as leaders, we're so focused out here on the things we're working on, we forget to focus in here and in our own hearts and our own minds, and to say, how is what we're doing impacting the organization? So I like what you're saying about owning it. And I do think you're right. There's a lot of organizations, I like to call them anthills, where people have created their anthill and we all agree this is so-and-so's anthill and they call the shots over there. And this is so-and-so's anthill. And we live in peace and harmony because everybody gets to run their anthills. And as long as you don't get into somebody else's anthill, there are no problems. And to me, that's very superficial harmony. And it's not, even though it appears on the surface to be a functional culture, it's really not a functional culture because it only operates by allowing people to be in that paradigm and to create that structure. And there's no interconnected structure,
Right.
which is a whole nother point of why the fluidity becomes really important, because fluid water is not separated, it is interconnecting. And with the volume of speed that things are changing to with 4.0, our industry 4.0, there's so many changes that we have to be able to interconnect these things. And
Right.
if we're just used to operating in our little box, it's difficult to do that.
No, yeah, absolutely. And, you know, that's the siloing of organizations. What you just described is kind of that siloing of organizations. And I mean, it has almost taken down some of the best companies in the world. Microsoft was incredibly siloed years ago, and it took Ballmer leaving for them to effectively begin to integrate everything into their current growth and their current cloud platform, Azure. So, and of course, Ballmer was, you know, one of the big three, right? Paul Allen, not Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and Ballmer. And so, you know, it was his baby, and you can, you know, you don't want to give it up. We see that in so many, especially in when the founder is the leader. And it's, I saw, oddly enough, I saw an article the other day that Zuckerberg is the only founder who is still the head of their startup in Silicon Valley, the major ones anyway.
Right.
So that's, you know, there's something to be said about that. Sometimes they get jerked out of those positions because the board deems them irrelevant. And sometimes they find out, realize they need to go, and they leave. And the question is when, you know, in those situations, when is the right time? And each organization and each person has to deal with that themselves. But yeah, right. You're right. The fluidity aspect. And what's one of the things that I love about that fluidity aspect is you've always got new ideas and new people coming in with those ideas. And it, by definition, it can't be incredibly structured, because it's like that old phrase, putting new wine in old wineskins. It's going to blow up. Mm-hmm. Because of just the nature of new wine and its stretching and the way that it expands. It's going to blow those things up. And, you know, that's one of the dangers of having this structuralism and then bringing new people in. And if you don't let that fluidity occur within your organization, within your structure, then something's going to explode. Just by definition. So, you know, that's one of the dangers of a really intense structuralism or hierarchialism or a siloed aspect of organizations.
Yeah, that's great. So good. So we kind of see why there's benefits to be more flexible and more fluid. And we also understand there's some challenges that we are going to face in trying to become more flexible and fluid. I think another, maybe just to finish that too, another one is just people don't know, like, how do we communicate when everything keeps changing? How do people know what's going on? That's really been like an argument, or not maybe an argument, a complaint of organizations where we don't know what's going on, and communication probably still hasn't reached the optimum peak. Even with email and text, it's gotten worse rather than better with more communication platforms. So making things more liquid is even more confusing, because already we had a hard time documenting our processes and procedures. We had a hard time documenting our hiring or our sales process or whatever it was. So now we finally got that documented. Are you saying we need to get rid of those processes and procedures? What are we really saying when we talk about being liquid? If you don't have a silo, what do you have? If you don't have an org chart, what do you have? What are we moving to? What are we saying?
Yeah, so we're moving to a more of interdisciplinary teams, cross-functional teams. It may be another word where you have teams that self-organize around an issue, around a project, around a cause, for instance. And so you're bringing in people from various aspects of your organization, and they're coming together, they're organizing, and in essence, they're developing their own leader, or they're appointing their own leader. And a lot of times they function for that moment. So maybe we do a lot of that in technology. For instance, if an issue happens, you start bringing in resources from a variety of teams to try to figure out the cause. And then when that issue is over, everybody just kind of goes away. It's not that so they're more ad hoc in that regard. Mm-hmm. But I mean, you're going to have processes that you're going to have. You've got a sales process that will exist. But again, as you continue to bring more people in, as you bring people who function as customers in that regard, when you try to think of the personal aspect of your sales process, and you bring people in who can speak to that, and then that's going to change. And you've got to allow that to change, and you've got to allow that process to be fluid and flexible, and not hold on to it like it is 1,000 pounds of gold, for instance. It's just, you've got to have that flexibility within your organization, within your teams, within your processes, so that those things change and adapt. Because in this age and in this world and in this time period, everything is changing and adjusting at a rapid speed. And it's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah. I think it's very intimidating to, I think on one level, sometimes you can go, oh yeah, I can let go. No big deal. Go ahead. You deal with the sales process. Yeah. You're like, really great. I'm so glad to be done with that. But when it comes to really letting go of control as leaders, a lot of times we do struggle with that, because as a leader, you've gotten used to being in control. And so I do think that speaks a bit to the challenge of truly letting go of control and allowing that evolution to happen. And right. Your point is good, that you may have that process. Let's say you've got a sales process, and here's our sales pipeline and the way we go about our proposals, things like that, whatever it is. But going back to your comment about cross-functional teams tend to not be arranged anymore by role or by position. And so out of our structural organization charts, often they're all positional authority, they're role right. authority, versus over here, there is a structure over here, but it's just so much more organic and fluid. So right. It looks more like arranging M&Ms. And right now we're going to arrange them by browns and greens and reds. And then we're going to put them in sets of brown, green, and red sets. And right. then we're going to put them in doubles or whatever it is. But we're arranging M&Ms, so to speak, and you may be a color, but your color is based on your skill set. And so that's where in our 3.0 era, where we really leaned into what are your skills and understanding your strengths and working to your strengths, 4.0 leans even more into that, where it's saying based on your skill, your color not because of your role, your color based on your skill set, your genius, your superpower, that's how you're being arranged on a team.
Yeah.
So if now we're creating a team to troubleshoot going into a new market, we're going to put together someone from HR, someone from marketing, someone from technology, someone from support. And this team, this green, red, blue, yellow M&M team is going to reassess our sales process and reaching this new market. And they're going to bring their collective wisdom together in order to upgrade and migrate the team to be what it needs. So to your point, there is this adapting and really this permission to change and right. the permission to evolve it and make it different. Like there's almost this expectation. In 2.0, you felt nervous where you're like, ooh, I think we could improve the process. Is it possible we could do this? And you kind of are on pins and needles, begging right. permission that maybe there might be an openness or receptivity to upgrade the process. But in this, it's almost that we expect people to be upgrading the process. And almost if you're not upgrading the process, you're kind of not doing your job, because right. things are changing so fast. we're expecting that it needs to be different in order to meet the changing time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, that's it's one of the things that in some situations you may even have to create a culturally aware sales process that is specific to an individual market. And sometimes you may even have to start from scratch, just abandon everything you know or not or have as a process and build this culturally relevant and culturally adaptive sales process as an example. So yeah, change is highly is really important, and essentially, you know, one of the things that's hardest for leaders to do is to let go and to let that responsibility be given out to other people and really not try to take it back in. That's the kind of really the challenge for a 2.0 leader in making that transition is you've got to let it go. You literally have to let it go. Somebody else has to do it. And then you have to train them to communicate out with transparency and with effectiveness, and let them just handle it. You have to be the coach in case they need help, but you let them just handle it. And that's really hard for that transition from a 2.0 to a 4.0 as an example.
I think that's why some of these conversations in 3.0, we really saw this effort to have these radical candor, that book that came out, and these robust conversations and things like that. And we know organizations are still struggling to have those because they're intimidating. And so culturally, a lot of times it's not safe to have those conversations. But in order for this to work, it really does assume what, like you said, there's that transparency. And it goes back, it reminds me of the red, yellow, green light of, I'm blanking on his name, the guy that came into Ford and in the meetings.
Alan.
Yeah, Alan, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So he came in and did the red, yellow, and everybody had green lights. And he's like, how do we all have green lights? And really the whole point was to admit failure. And it's not about admitting failure, so to speak. It's saying, I'm struggling. This isn't working, right, so that the team can really effectively solve it. So there is this element that some of these skills that we've been trying to develop become imperative skills, that you must be okay with failure. You must be okay to say, I have no idea what I'm doing. Exactly. I thought we were headed here and everything is falling apart. I need your collective wisdom and insight. And if we have too much ego to be able to say that, things are going to fall apart, which is this fear of letting go, because in the 2.0, we're like, oh, I better just check on them. No, more we have to create this culture where people can be open, honest, genuine, and confident, but not egotistical, so that everything is just out in that open and you can work on it together.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking, you know, you struggle. You've got to create that. The biggest part is creating that culture where people are open and willing enough to say, you know what, I don't know what I'm doing. I need help, and not to condemn them or not to judge them, but to see that as an opportunity to coach them, to help build their skill set, to help develop them as people and ultimately as leaders. Because, you know, that's the goal is not to, as a leader, your one of your biggest goals is to develop leaders, and so you see it as a coaching time, as a teaching time. And if you can do that with someone, if you can create that space, then all of a sudden you're going to have other people who are going to come in, and then it creates that coaching. As a leader, you become a coach and not a manager or not someone who does everything. But you're right. I think that's a very hard thing to learn and a very hard thing to let go of.
Well, and also looping back to what you were saying at the top of the call, it allows resources to be deployed. So It's possible that we might have set up a team that was missing a very important piece. So in saying that, we're like, oh my goodness, we completely looped out accounting. We need to bring accounting in and get their perspective on this, because yes, you're right, you don't have all the information, or we forgot this piece. So sometimes you're right, it could be coaching a skill set that's missing, it could be upgrading something that's being overlooked, but it may be a resource or an adaptation that needs to be developed in order to support or included in order to allow that to move forward.
Absolutely.
So awesome. Good. All right. Well, this is a great topic. I think for all of us, just in these rapid times of change, to be thinking about how are we fluid? How are we adapting? What are we holding on to? What are we controlling? What are we being rigid about versus what do we let go of? And how do we let go of in a way that things don't go to, you know, hell in a handbag,
Right.
but that they actually upgrade.
Exactly. Yeah. And I, you know, that's one of the things that would be, it'd be interesting to know how are other leaders making this transition, if they're making that transition at all. What skills have they found, or what actions have they found that were helpful in that regard? What wasn't helpful in some instances, and then how we and then, you know, we'd love to have that, your feedback, and kind of see what you're doing. I have my own thoughts about that, and maybe we can talk about that in another episode. But yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys are doing.
Absolutely. Sounds good. All right. Well, share your comments, leaders. We'd love to hear from you and how you're dealing with adapting. And we will pick it up next week.
Absolutely. Take care.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.